Hello, DevOps friends. How's it going? I'm Jochen, the Monospace Mentor, and welcome to my stream. It's another Tuesday, and it's a rainy Tuesday here in Ireland. So, what better to do than sit inside and do some work? And since I wanted to have some company, I'm inviting you to join me and have a conversation, have a chat about stuff. I'm going to work on a Ruby on Rails application, in particular the hosting dashboard for my company's managed hosting platform. And I'm going to add a new feature to it, which is called service management, which allows us to add generic services to the application, whatever those services are going to be in the future. At the moment, most of the services in the application are hard-coded, and that, of course, is not really scalable and doesn't make things easier. And having a generic framework in there that allows us to add any kind of service that people can book and use in their hosting accounts will be a great improvement, and that's why I'm going to try and get into implementation now that I've pretty much planned what I want to do and how the data model is going to look like. But first, welcome. Hey, Mind Explosion, welcome back. Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing great. Let's make this an interactive show. I don't like if these streams are more monologues on my side. So pop into chat, share what you're doing at the moment, or something that excites you, and we'll get a nice mix of conversation and work. Is there anything that I need to update you on? I don't think there is. Nope. Everything is pretty much in flux right now. Nothing in particular that's exciting on my side, I think. So, yeah. LPC, yes! Yes, I did rebrand quite a while ago, actually. Was it about a year ago already? I'm not really sure, but yeah. So Monospace Mentor is what I'm calling my teaching business. And so it made perfect sense to also rebrand the channel here. You'll find my website at monospacementor.com. And I even have my own merch. for Monospace Mentor. Okay, so I would say let's get going. Here you can see the ADR that I've been writing, the Architectural Design Record, number 2, and that's about the plan and service management. And I worked a little bit on a data model. As you can see, I'm going to introduce quite a few new classes, quite a few new models to this application, because to make services and the associated plans generic can be quite complex. But I think I found a nice mixture that I can implement, and that will accommodate most of the stuff that we need to do. And I think I also found quite a good naming schema. These names evolved the most, I think. And so let's see how this works. So we'll jump right to the situation as it is now. What this new model will allow me to do is to add a plan or multiple plans for our hosting products. In this case, it's the Box Pro plan that I'm adding here in this code example. And this plan has a status of active. It's available at the moment for purchase. And then I can start modeling what I call services. And services are simply resources for our hosting customers. That could be a MySQL database, it could be a Redis instance, it could be a Solar index. Things like that will be modeled as services, and even the PHP worker set is created as a service. Here we call these workers PU, processing units, and here I'm adding a service for these PUs with the scope of cluster, because the amount of service workers are global across a customer's application cluster, and not dependent on the amount of websites they have. All the websites share this set of PU, and a hosting plan can only have one instance of this service, or as I call them, capacities. I did call them instances earlier. Maybe it's a good idea to return to instance, actually, now that I'm explaining it. And that's exactly why I'm explaining it to you, because I'm basically using you as my rubber ducks here. By explaining it out loud, I can actually determine if my plan is sound or if there are any issues with it. And I think since I instantaneous said instance, it might actually make sense to call service capacity a service instance, which has a specific capacity, and that's expressed in the capacity attributes here, but we can call them instance attributes as well. So we call let's workshop this. We have a service instance which is 16 PU. And this instance has specific attributes. In this case, well, it has 16 PU. And I do remember that yeah, okay. Wait a minute. I'm confusing myself because I made a grave error. And that is that I did not pull the latest changes. That's why I'm getting so confused here. Let's see. Nothing changed, but that might actually be because I did not push the latest changes on my workstation. Yeah, and there we have all the service instance stuff, and it's much more elaborate than on my stream machine. Okay, give me just a second to commit everything here. Let me just a second. Okay, I think that's it. So let's commit this again as work in progress, and we'll push it. Okay, and now let's go here. Pull the latest changes. Bow, boom. Yeah, this is more like it. Apologies. I confused myself, and in consequence I confused you. So we have two new plans here, because elaborating examples here does make sense. So you can actually tell, well, can we actually reflect everything that we want to reflect in these data models? So I created two plans, which is one is FreeStylebox Solo and one is FreeStylebox Pro. Both are active. And of course, we'll have different prices, but I haven't built in pricing yet. Pricing would make the whole model even more complex. And I think I want to have the technical side of things down first. So then we create a service. In this case, it's the processing units. It has a scope of a cluster, which means it applies to a cluster, not to a single website. Basically, it applies to across websites on a single cluster. And the customer can upgrade and downgrade. I'm missing the... yeah, okay. I read a little bit further down. Okay, so that's the service. That does make sense. Upgrade and downgrade mainly means, is it technically feasible to do a product upgrade and downgrade, and that's actually possible. We, of course, only want to offer an upgrade if that's possible to do an in-place upgrade. So the customer doesn't have to, say, commission a new plan or something. And then we create service attributes, which are associated with that service. In this case, the service has a single service attribute, and that is the processing units. The unit that will be displayed is PU. So I could actually replace this ellipsis with service SRE PU. That makes it unambiguous. I left those variables out first, but I realized that it does make sense to make it a little bit less pseudocode and actual Ruby code here, because it'll show how these things are related to each other. And now we can create a service instance of this service with its attribute. The service instance gets a name, and we can assign if this is the default instance for this service. And then we create a service instance attribute, which corresponds to a service attribute, because it simply has the concrete value for this attribute. So in this case, I define the service instance PU16 does have 16 PU units. PU units is a little bit double because it means processing units, but it makes the variable a little bit easier to read. SRE underscore PU would be a little bit confusing because that's already the name of the service itself. And alternatively, we have another service instance, which is the same thing with 32 PU. So it's another service instance with its own service instance attribute, and the only difference is the value of 32 back here. We could model these values as numbers, or they are actual numbers, but in this context, it doesn't really matter, or it's not really necessary to make numbers actual numbers, because they mostly get displayed, and even if we need to write them into some kind of configuration file, then we'll simply write the string, and that should be okay too. Or we might have some conditional construct that will turn these strings into a number if necessary. So in terms of the database, we'll store all these values as strings. Calf says hi. Welcome back. Now we get to who can even book these services. And here we create a service eligibility. And it is associated with the Pro plan, which can book the Pro PU service in a maximum of one instance. You can't book multiple PU sets. You need to upgrade from one to the next, which is different to our old hosting plans, which I've described further up in the document, where you were able to basically mix and match these services and upgrade and downgrade as well, which was pretty confusing because it ended up to be a big hodgepodge. And that's exactly why we changed our hosting plans to be able to get this max instance down to one. Cal, don't worry about asking questions outside the office hour, which I do on Friday afternoons. It's perfectly okay to ask during my regular live streams as well. Well, in this case, I would answer very bluntly, practice, practice, practice. I don't think, well, yeah, get into the editor and start using it. Even if at the beginning you simply, the only thing that you do Vim related is switching between normal mode and insert mode, which is of course necessary for you to use the editor. And otherwise you'll move the cursor around with the cursor keys, or maybe you'd like to teach yourself HJKL navigation, but that will already enable you to make changes to a file. That's exactly how I learned Vim. And that's where I was stuck for many years, actually. All I could do is enter Vim, make some basic changes, navigate across a document or a file, and exit it again after writing it. And I left it at that because that was all I wanted to do when I logged into a server and needed to make a quick change to a configuration file or something like that. And otherwise, I chose to use a graphical editor back when I was still using Macs. I used editors like TextMate or Sublime Text, and I did enjoy having a GUI editor over Vim. And only later I realized, well, I have very basic Vim skills and it has served me well so far. How about getting deeper into things? And that's when I started trying to teach myself the movements that allow you to jump to specific places. For example, if I want to jump directly to the colon after service instance, I can do F:, and that gets me here automatically. Or if I want to jump between the parentheses, I can use the % navigation. That gets me to the opening and to the end parentheses. That's when you can start and get into the Vim specific navigation features. And there are actually pretty nifty cheat sheets and even diagrams out there that help you with identifying, wait, how do I jump back to the colon that's after plan, and how do I jump ahead to the colon in after service instance here? Well, it's simply lowercase f colon to jump forward and uppercase F to jump back. And so that way you start getting a little bit of muscle memory and a feeling for how Vim works in terms of navigation. And then, of course, with time, you can also start adding plugins to give you better quality of life or new features that aren't built into NeoVim. Step by step, you will become a NeoVim Pro. And I have no idea how long it'll take you. That depends on how much you practice, I guess. And that's the only way to really learn that stuff. Cav says, I have a Linux class learning basic stuff, but copy and paste, delete more than 2 lines, it's so hard. I think, how dumb I am for not making a simple copy and paste. Well, I don't think you're dumb. I think you're just not used to how Vim thinks. And for example, in terms of copy and paste, it's simply that the terms are different. So if I want to, say, copy this block here, I can use the capital V for visual selection. There are always mnemonics that you can use to memorize things, but I guess you need to read about them 2, 5, or 10 times until they really stick. And now I can simply use cursor movements to select these 3 lines, for example, and then I can use yank for copy. It's not copy, it's yank, and therefore once you have that down, it's easy to memorize that it's the Y key that copies these lines. And as you can see down here in my status line, it said 3 lines yanked, and then I can paste, and paste is actually capital P or lowercase p, depending on where you want to insert. If I want to insert before the cursor position, I simply use a capital P, and that inserts the same block again. I can use U to undo, which makes perfect sense. And if I'm down here, let's say I'm down here, and I want to insert the block after this line, then I press lowercase p and it gets appended below. So this stuff makes sense once you have the whole logic down and the terminology, which is in many cases Vim specific, because Vim predates many similar features like cut and paste. I don't think people were talking about cutting and pasting, at least not on desktop environments, when Vim or VI was invented. And so that might be the case why it says yank instead of copy, for example. Said an entire life using VS Code and Windows is hard to use. U, V, J, K, L, and H. Yeah, it is, and it needs practice. What some people do, for example, and I think I did the same thing, I actually disabled the arrow keys in my Vim configuration. That's possible. Usually Vim is pre-configured to use both the arrow keys and HJKL. And to force myself to learn these home row navigation keys, I did actually disable the arrow keys in Vim, and then I started using the arrow keys and the cursor didn't move, and then I remembered, oh yeah, I need to use J and K to go up and down and not the arrow keys. And it's all about practice. Eventually it will click. And for most people, I would say, it's worth it. It's a little bit of work, but it pays off. It's going to pay off. And so, yeah, give it a try. It's the same thing with me and my split keyboard here that I configured in ColeMac layout. I'm getting better typing and coding in ColeMac gradually, which makes Vim a lot harder, actually, because J, K, L, and H are not on the home rows anymore. But slowly but surely I'm getting there, and I get more proficient using ColeMac, and it's fun to challenge my brain a little bit like this, and I hope it'll stave off Alzheimer's a little bit more and things like that. So yeah, let's keep those brain cells engaged. Angel D12, welcome. Hello. Doing great. I hope you're doing great too. So, I was about to explain my data model to you and by transitive parameters to myself. Here, the service eligibility defines that people who have the Pro plan booked can actually get the Pro PU service. Actually, they must have it because otherwise they won't have any PHP workers for their websites. But they can only have one service instance. And in terms of instances, they have the choice between PU16 and PU32, where PU16 is the default. These are the two options they have based on this example definition here. Next to PUs, they can also, if they want to, book a Solr text index. And so we create a service for this. We create the service attribute. That's not a service instance attribute, actually. That's a service attribute. Yeah, I made a mistake here. See, it's really good to go through these things because sometimes you overlook these things. So this service has one attribute apparently, and that's the index capacity, and that's expressed in the unit of documents. And then we can define an arbitrary number of service instances. In this case, I simply defined one for this service Solr. The name of the service instance is Solr 10K because its instance attribute related to the Solr docs service attribute has the value of 10,000 documents. And then we define another service eligibility. People who have booked the Pro plan can get a Solr service. The Solr service is scoped differently. It's scoped per website. So each website a customer has can have its own Solr index. And we define that customers on the Pro plan can have a Solr service with max instances of 1, and that's based on the scope. So each website can only have one index. And then we have one option here in this example, and that's with a service capacity of 10K documents. The third service we define here is MySQL. It's scoped per website. We can upgrade and downgrade at will. We have a basic MySQL instance here, which defines an attribute in terms of storage space. We'll probably add more instance attributes here as well, maybe RAM. Yeah, pretty definitely RAM. So it'll have 4 gigabytes of disk storage space, but it'll have less RAM, I guess. Why not add that right away? So I press double Y, which will yank the current line I'm on. Let's do a little bit of NeoVim coaching for Calv here. And we'll add another service instance attribute. We can actually eliminate this ellipses here as well, because we can now actually define the service is MySQL basic 1. Let's do the same here. And Now I want to change the string inside these double quotes, and I can use basic Vim motions and locations for that. I'll press C for change, and then I need to define what or how much I want to change. And because I want to change the string inside these double quotes, I use I double quote, which means inside double quotes. So by typing CI double quote, it'll delete the contents of the string and go into insert mode automatically. And I can say RAM. And let's assume I want to define 1 GB of RAM for this very basic service instance. I need to change the 4 into a 1. There are replacement keys as well, but usually I simply use CW to change the word I'm on, which is just the 4, and then I can replace that with a 1. And the unit is actually gigabytes too, even though this is a different service attribute. So let's go here. I want to delete the word instance, and I can simply do that by telling Vim delete everything to the next capital A, the capital A of attribute. So I say D for delete, and then T capital A, which means to the capital A. DT capital A does delete everything to the next capital A, and by pressing plus on the next line, pressing the period on the next line, I can repeat the same change for this as well. And that's that. So this service has 2 service attributes, and people on the solo plan have access to the MySQL service with a maximum instance of 1 per the scope of the service, which is per website. The instance eligibility for MySQL Basic 1 applies to the solo plan. It's not the default. Why isn't it the default? I think it should be the default. Wouldn't make sense otherwise, I think. Especially since it's the only eligible instance, apparently, at least in this example. And we'll do the same for Pro users. So for customers on the Pro plan, they have access to the MySQL plan, but they actually have 2 instances. So they can actually book 2 MySQL databases per website if they want to. In this example, at least. And for this, they have equally access to the MySQL Basic 1 instance. And we'll make that the default too, especially since we don't have any other options after all. So that's all the services. And then when people book these services and plans, they can basically trigger this call here where we create a cluster plan which associates the Pro plan with the current cluster. And this plan is active, which allows me to also have plans that were booked in the past, which will then still persist in the database, but will have the status of passive or deprovisioned or something like that. We can also add something like a booking date, for example, or booking time associated with this plan, so we can actually see, okay, this plan was booked on this day, and there was a previous plan that was booked then and decommissioned at another time, which creates a lot more transparency in terms of who had access to what when. And then we can actually define a cluster service instance where we assign the current cluster a service of Pro PU16, which, according to the previous eligibility definitions, should be valid. And then, of course, we can also book services on the website level, where we have some website and we simply associate a service instance. Let's be precise in naming our arguments here. So this website is assigned a MySQL Basic 1 service instance and a Solar 10K service instance. And this way we can actually pretty much model anything we want. We can add new services to this whole construct, and both on the cluster and on the website level, because one customer cluster can have an arbitrary number of websites. And this should be pretty much watertight. I can't find any major fault with that at the moment. So let's just simply look at how I tried, if this can actually apply to our non-existent plans that we had in the past. So we did have a plan. So we will call this Pro. Let's assign variables here as well. Apparently I didn't spend a lot of time with this deprecated example here. And that's exactly why I take a look at this, simply to update it to current to the state these models are in. So we create a service that needs to have a scope, and we need to define if it's upgradable or downgradable. So service is a box. The capacity items, there aren't any capacity items anymore. They are called instances now. But I need to say, let me see, service. What is it called? What is the scope? And is it upgradable and downgradable? So the that's the name. It needs a scope. The scope is, in this case, cluster void. And is it upgradable? Gradable? In this case, I would say no. Because as I mentioned earlier, these service instances were for mix and match. So they could pick as many as they liked, and you wouldn't downgrade a specific instance, you would simply add it or remove it. So they're not really upgradable or downgradable. I think I should just call this upgrade and downgrade. Yeah, I did actually. Well done, past me. Downgrade false as well. And here you can see how I'm still struggling with my Colmac layout. So, we have a service. Now we need service instances associated with the service, and they have a name and maybe a default. So we need to create the service here. We will call it Pro Box. So let's do this differently. Let's use CT comma to change everything up to the next comma, and therefore I can simply say service is Pro Box. The instance name is, and we used t-shirt sizes back then, well, FrySybox S was the default. And just to be sure about the context, apparently I called this attribute service default. Green333221, thanks for the follow. But that's not a hex color code for green, is it? That's more of a very dark gray. But yeah, welcome to the channel. Thanks for the follow. Over on YouTube, Giant asked, I have a question. I am a fresher seeking a DevOps role. What kind of projects should I do? Since DevOps as a movement has the goal to bridge the gap between development and operations, I would say do projects on both sides of this former divide, which means do software development stuff and system administration stuff. Maybe simply take it easy and create a simple web application and package it in a container image, and then try and get this container image running, say, on Docker using Docker Compose, or maybe using Podman, which is a great alternative to Docker, and get a feeling and experience for both sides, where as a developer, with a developer hat on, you do development, you use development environments, you use packaging tools like Docker, for example. And on the operations side, with your ops and sysadmin hat on, you then need to make something from these, say, Docker images. And that way, you'll get a feeling how these two sides of the DevOps coin relate to each other. And then I would say try and get into automation of these things. How can you automatically create a new container image if you've changed the code or the contents of your website? How do you automate deployment? All these things. And that way you'll get deeper into the whole DevOps philosophy. And I think that should get you going. And from there are many options you have to specialize and to get a feeling for where you want to go. But yeah, you need to start somewhere, and I would say start by doing projects where you create something like a static website and deploy that as a container image. That's a great first project to do, to get something where you have to do both development stuff, like, for example, getting a static site generator running with all its dependencies. That's a dev task. And then you create a Docker image. That's also a dev task, but then it becomes an ops task by deploying this container image on, say, your workstation, or maybe a virtual private server that you're running somewhere, stuff like that. That's how I would recommend getting into this, and that's how I will structure my DevOps courses as well. We'll do projects like this, which are easy to grasp and get an instant return in terms of experience. Calf asks, CI/CD, Kubernetes, Docker, is it at junior level? Are these junior level topics? I assume that's what you mean. I wouldn't say, no, Kubernetes itself is definitely not a junior level topic because of its complexity. You, as a junior, I would expect you to use existing tooling. If there is a Kubernetes cluster to which you are supposed to deploy stuff, I'd expect there to be someone who is more of a senior level and provides you with tooling, with documentation to use a Kubernetes cluster. Running Kubernetes, setting up Kubernetes is definitely not a junior level topic. CI/CD, depends. Using CI/CD is something that you should learn while being a junior. Again, there should be a CI/CD system in place already, maybe provided by a service provider such as GitLab, for example, or provided by your platform team or something like that, if you're running your own CI/CD platform. So get acquainted with using that platform first. That is something that I would recommend getting into while you are at the junior level, because it will be a requirement if you want to progress to a more senior level. And Docker is one of the tools of the trade nowadays. And so I would say, yeah, that's something that you should learn early on as well. I wouldn't require Docker experience from someone whom I want to hire as a junior, but I would expect them to get into this quite quickly and early and become more familiar with Docker, because that's definitely another hard requirement if you want to progress in your career. Onion Vulnerable joining us over on YouTube saying, hey, Monospace Mentor, how are you? I'm doing great. Having fun doing my data modeling here. And so all is good. Let's see. The service eligibility for the Pro Legacy plan. So we should rename this. That makes actual sense, calling this Pro Legacy. So let's rename this here as well. Service instance is Pro Legacy. The instance name is FrostBox S. That's the smallest t-shirt size we offered back in the day, and it had 8 PU. And then we create another service instance where we can say Service Pro Legacy again, and then we had the t-shirt size M, which had twice as much PU. And then let's take a look at service eligibility, because that changed. That changed, where we said, okay, it associates a plan with a service and the number of instances. So the plan is Pro Legacy. The service is, I named it Service Box. Let's call it Pro Box. Oh yeah, okay, so I made a mistake here. That's the Pro Legacy plan. And the service is Pro Box. Yeah, that's why it's called FrostBox Box. So people on the Pro Legacy plan were able to choose a Pro Box service. And from this service, they had multiple options where the instance eligibility, where we associate plan and service instance, not service capacity. We renamed that to instance, so it's good to make this consistent. We allowed SL Pro S, that's the service level, which is called now service instance. I think for simplicity's sake, we'll simply say that's the Pro S. And then here we'll have the Pro M. And then we can associate that, and we could say, okay, Pro S is the service default. Alternatively, people can also choose the Pro M. And in terms of service eligibility, we can say service instances, or max instances, I think is the name of the attribute I chose. We'll set this to 0. And 0 doesn't mean they have access to the service, but they can't choose any instance, which wouldn't make any sense. Then we would simply delete the service eligibility. A 0 simply means infinite number. Maybe we would even say, okay, yeah, to keep things under control, you can have a maximum of 5. We never did that because we never got there. Because yeah, at the point where customers started ramping up 5 options on top of each other, we said, okay, yeah, that's getting unwieldy. We need to change to the current hosting plan. Lots of beginners joining us over on YouTube. Himanshu asks, want to ask you, as you are in the DevOps field, so what is going to be the future of DevOps? I'm just a beginner coder and deciding my path. As I said earlier, DevOps is more of a mindset that wants to bridge the gap between development and operations. It's not really a job description, even although many companies treat it as such. What DevOps wanted to do was somehow get developers and operations people to a shared table and get them talking, because up to that point, there was a huge problem with these two groups having completely opposing incentives. Developers get paid for innovation, i.e. for change, and operations people get paid for stability, i.e. no change. And that's where there were lots of conflicts that were basically hurting the business. Because, of course, if you have two groups that have opposing goals, that makes it hard to actually achieve your business goals. And so the DevOps movement was started to find ways where these two groups could talk to each other and understand each other better and get things done for the business that was paying both sides salaries. And so in terms of DevOps, that's something where you simply want to know, how was this, or how do actual companies implement this in practice? How do they make sure that dev and ops are aligned and working together towards a common business goal? And that includes both technical and cultural aspects. Technical aspects could be something like CI/CD, for example, where you make sure that changes in, say, application code actually result in a deliverable that can then be picked up by the ops part and will eventually end up in production. But it also can mean communication, for example, having everyone on a single chat platform, having everyone have pizza once a week. Things like that, where you simply make sure that problems are discussed and resolved, hopefully. And so that's something that you can practice all the time. And if companies use the term DevOps, they want to see that you have this mindset where you can say, yeah, I have experience both on the software development side, even if it's just a little bit of experience, you need to be a pro coder. And I have system administration experience as well. So I can see where these two fields go together and where they get into each other's way. And that's where I would say you can become pretty practical, because you can then get acquainted with developer tooling, stuff like Docker, build tools, things like that, and system administration stuff as well. As I recommended to Jayanth earlier, I would say do projects like building a static website with some content and deploy that to a virtual private server or to a server in your home, and then start automating these things, because that's what DevOps requires, what DevOps results in eventually, because it makes both sides' lives easier. If something is automated, if build automation is in place, you don't have to issue Docker commands anymore. Your CI system will create new images every time you push a change to your, say, static website. Ideally, you have deployment automation in place as well. As you mentioned, Ansible, by example. You could have CI spin up an Ansible task or an Ansible playbook that then goes, takes your updated static site repository and deploys it to your VPS. And in the end, you'll have a workflow in place similar to what I'm actually using personally, where I can make a change to my static website, push it to the Git repository, and everything else happens automatically. And a few minutes later, my website updates are online. And that's why I would go in terms of getting more practice in the whole DevOps realm. Cap says, I'm going to work and have an interview today. Have a good day. Thanks for the answers. Always happy to answer questions, especially on Fridays when I do my office hour live streams, where I do nothing but answer questions. Today, I'll try and focus a little bit more on my own work here and answer questions on the side. Himanshu has a concern. Can this field be replaced by AI in upcoming years? I don't think so. The skills that are necessary to do work in the DevOps realm, culminating in the SRE realm, where site reliability engineering becomes a real engineering skill, LLMs will probably never, I would say, be able to do things like that. An LLM can't do architecture, for example, because it doesn't understand anything. And so people will probably use AI to make specific tasks easier, either generative AI or more traditional AI, as in machine learning, for example. And people who can use these tools will have an advantage, but I think the opposite is the case. People who will be able to use these tools will replace people who can't use these tools. It's not that the tools themselves will replace the people. Where I think machine learning can do a lot more is, for example, in the monitoring and alerting realm, and companies are already applying AI to these fields, starting to apply them, because, for example, analyzing time series with monitoring metrics, for example, to find outliers, to find instances that point to an issue, might be easier for a machine learning algorithm than it is for people. I don't think there are systems in place yet that can do that more reliably than an experienced human, an experienced SRE, but I think tasks like this will get easier thanks to machine learning. But again, I don't think that will mean that SRE people will be replaced. Those tools will just be additional tools that make people more efficient. I mean, if you can't use, say, an IDE nowadays, you can't really become, or you'll have difficulties getting hired as a software engineer if you have to admit, well, I've never used VS Code, I can't use NeoVim, I have no idea how an editor works. You need to know these tools. Those are basic requirements, and can imagine that AI-based tools, machine learning-based tools will become more of a requirement in the future too. But I wouldn't be concerned about my job in any way. Okay, now let's see. We've modeled these two service instances and defined their eligibility to customers. And then I did create a cluster plan. Let's look at the more up-to-date example down here. Here we have the cluster plan, where we associate a cluster with a plan and a status. That's pretty much the same here. We take an old cluster and we associate it with the Pro Legacy plan. And yeah, I guess the status back then at least would have been active. And we haven't defined any website services that we'd model here, but they would work exactly like modern plans as well. Yeah, we don't have any legacy website plans. And let's think things through one more time here. So by associating the Pro Legacy plan with this cluster, that means according to the service eligibility, I have access to Pro Box as a service. And of this service, I can book up to 5 instances. Which instances do I have up for as a choice? That's the Pro S instance and the Pro M instance. And they differ in their instance attributes. What we're missing is the service attribute, actually. So let's copy that from down here. A service always needs a service attribute, and I guess we'll call it Pro Box PU. We'll associate this with the Pro Box plan, and this will have this attribute has the name processing units and the unit PU. And therefore, the service instance attribute simply will reference this service. Service is going to be Pro Box PU, and the value for this instance attribute is 8, which means 8 processing units. And same goes for the 16, for the M t-shirt size. Service is Pro Box. Wait. And service instances are not associated with... yes, they are. Of course they are associated with the service. But the service instance attributes are associated with the service instance, so that's Pro S, of course. Yeah, that makes more sense. Pro S has 8 PU, and Pro M as a service instance has 16 PU. Yeah, that makes more sense. And now that means a customer can book up to 5 instances of S and M as they want. They can book 5S, which will add up to 40 PU, or they can mix in M's as well. And of course, we also had L and XL back in the day. So there's a little bit of choice up in the higher PU ranges. And yeah, that pretty much works out okay. Theo! Welcome! Good morning! Good time zone! How's it going? Hope you had a good start to your week. Okay, I guess this model is now making sense to me. Good as you can make it. That's brilliant. Happy to hear it. All right, so a plan can have a name and a status. Let's. Oh, look at that. Yeah, it's simply called plan. Hosting plan? No, hosting is the whole context. I think the hosting is pretty much redundant here. Otherwise, we could name everything hosting service instance, hosting cluster plan. That doesn't make any sense. So we have a plan, and we'll have a string for the name, and we'll have a Boolean for, no, it's an enum or it's an actual integer. We'll represent it in Ruby as an enum, but the status is going to be an integer because, yeah, that allows us to have as many statuses or status options as we want. That's that. Nice and simple. Let's switch to the service, which will have a name, a scope, and then 2 booleans for upgrade, not upgradable. Let's keep stuff simple, upgrade and downgrade. Or we could say can upgrade, can downgrade. There might be actual services where you can only upgrade, but not downgrade anymore. For example, if you take a file system in Linux, you can always expand your file system if you have free space available, but it's pretty hard to free up space again because that will require a complete reorganization of your file system. So there are instances I could think of where an upgrade is possible, but a downgrade is not. So this service has can upgrade and can downgrade. So let's add that here as well. And there's another service. That should do it. Okay, so again, services have a name, a scope, and the booleans. So let's add that here. We'll have a string for the name. We'll have an integer for the scope. At the moment, we only have 2 values. It's either cluster scope or website scope. I don't see this expanding anytime soon, but on the other hand, I wouldn't want to limit this as a boolean to say scope is cluster true false. Let's make it an integer. Wasting a few bits here doesn't really matter. So any plans, Theo? Anything you've planned for the day? Anything exciting coming up? I actually had planned to do a little bit of a hike with a customer who's vacationing in Ireland at the moment. But the weather forecast was bad enough that we postponed it to tomorrow, where there will be less rain and more sun, and I'm very much looking forward to that. And that meant I was able to do this live stream based on the fact that I am able to do a little bit of work here. So, service instance. Service default might actually be the correct attribute, but we also need a service reference and a name. So we'll have a service ID. On top of the ID, each of these models automatically gets internally. How are these actually reflected here? I think I'll use the term that is used in migrations. This service ID references another model, and the service instance will also have a name. Okay. Then the service instance attribute references a service instance, of course, and has a value. No, wait, we need a service attribute first. The service attribute has a name and a unit. Yeah, we are missing that completely. So let's copy this. The service attribute does, of course, also... No, it references... Oh, wait. It does also reference a service, so... Let's actually move this upwards a little bit. How does this work? Is it just K? No? Do we... Oh, yeah. Is it Alt and K? No. I'll look this up. Let's take a look at my dot files. This is something that I actually need to learn. I recently introduced the mini plugin to my NeoVim configuration, and there are a few keybinds that I'm not familiar with yet. So let's look this up. That's basically NVim mini. It's not a special configuration, is it? Yes, it is. It's Shift Meta, so it's Shift Alt and HJKLM. Okay, HJKL. Shift Meta. All right, so let's switch back to my dashboard API. We'll mark this, and now we'll do Alt Shift and K. Yeah, now we can move it up. The service has a service attribute. Of course, this attribute references the service. The attribute has a name. So that's oh, wait. Yeah, I'm confusing stuff here. That's a T string name. It's actually T references. That's the service ID. Same here. So that's T references service ID. Service attribute string name and another string for the unit. Then we have a service instance, which also has a service instance attribute. So we first need a references for the service instance ID. And then we'll have a simple string for the value associated with the name and unit of the service attribute. Okay, that's that. Then we have the service eligibility. That connects a plan with the service and limits the max instances. Service eligibility means which plan is allowed to choose which service and is there a limit to the number of instances they can choose. A specific plan might, however, not have access to all the instances of a specific service. Maybe a small plan, a cheap plan, has only access to the first few tiers, and the more expensive plan has a lot more tiers to choose from. So that T references another times the plan. And we also now references the service instance ID. Service instance ID. Maybe I should rethink if service eligibility is actually necessary, because the service eligibility is basically a transitive attribute of the instance eligibility. If a specific instance of a service is eligible for a plan, that means the service in general is eligible for the plan. That's something I should actually but those architectural considerations is something that I'd like to do separately outside of the stream. On the other hand, since I have you here, what do you think? Should I have a service eligibility, even if that is basically a transitive property of service instance eligibility? It might make a few things easier. But I have my doubts, to be honest. Because the thing is, a plan, this instance eligibility connects a plan to a service instance, and the service instance belongs to a service. Therefore, the plan is also associated with the service in a transitive way. So that's why I'm questioning the usefulness of the service eligibility. Okay. Anyway, maybe I'll take a walk later and let this ferment a little bit in my brain. Cluster plan. A cluster plan simply associates a service. No, a plan with a cluster, as the name implies, and it has a status. So we can have multiple plans associated with a cluster, probably separated by time. So that is T references a cluster, and it references a plan. And it has a status, which again is going to be an integer. Will we also add a datetime field already where we say provisioned or assigned? I think we'll call it commissioned, and then we'll also have a decommissioned. That's the times when the customer booked or cancelled the cluster plan. We could even add 2 more datetime fields where we say provisioned and deprovisioned. Not sure why we would track that. And if I'm not sure yet, I won't decide yet. So we'll leave it at this. And those 2 fields can be populated automatically by the status change logic. Now, cluster service instance, I don't... Ah, yes, yeah, of course. Makes sense to separate those 2. Did we use that in the old? Oh, we didn't even use it. So, wait, I'll go down here and we'll simply steal those 2 lines here. Insert those here. So in this case, for this specific cluster, we have an old cluster with Pro Legacy. And no, the cluster service instance can never be associated with a website. That's completely wrong. That's a cut and paste error here. That, of course, needs to be a cluster. The current cluster is associated with a service instance. So yeah, we're still discovering new errors here. Service instance, and the service instance for Pro PU16. That is a service instance that we can associate. Yep, that makes sense. And then we have the website instance where we say, okay, this website has a MySQL service and a Solr service. Okay. And up here, we could say, okay, the cluster has Pro PU16 as its service. And since they are legacy plans where we could mix and match, we could create another one where we would say, okay, yeah, that's another 16. Because that was possible. In effect, they had a Pro PU32 and might actually be paying a little bit more because, yeah, there might be a discount for the PU32. That doesn't apply if you book 2 PU16s. And we could use some website where we associate MySQL, which we haven't defined here yet, so let's leave this out for the time being. This part up here is mainly to prove that our data model would have been able to model our old plans as well. Gianni is joining us over on YouTube asking, what are you making? I'm working on a Ruby on Rails application. This application is the customer dashboard for my company's managed hosting platform. And I want to extend its data model so we can manage arbitrary services associated with hosting plans and websites. That's the short answer. So, cluster plan. Then we have a cluster service instance, which pretty much should consist of a reference to a cluster ID and a reference to a service instance ID, as the name implies. And shouldn't have too much else. And I guess it's very similar down here, but CT underscore, no, CT underscore, that's a website ID and a service instance. Did we add the scope of a service? Yeah, it's an integer field. Okay. So, we're getting more and more ready for implementation. Implementation meaning I can actually start generating these models and their database migrations to be able to actually use them in my application code. But let's take a look at the time. It's 4:45 here. And I guess I'm going to take a short break and check my energy levels to see if I'm going to go into the implementation phase. But what we can do in any way is commit these changes. And I did test out Zelich as my terminal multiplexer lately. I did not stick with it, but I realized it's really handy to have your multiplexer be able to quickly launch an application. And so I did that with LazyGit. And now that I've switched back to tmux as my terminal multiplexer, I added that key binding as well, so I can actually spin up LazyGit in my terminal. That allows me to quickly commit these changes. And we could say, okay, well, let's be humble and say it's still a work in progress, even if it might be the final version of this architecture design record. Well, it's not a design record yet because there's no prose that explains how these things work. Question is, will I do this? It'll be a nice exercise in applying the architectural design record method, where you simply write out what you'd like to do with your architecture. In this case, I'd like to extend the data model. On the other hand, I'm the person that's going to implement this, and writing letters to myself, yeah, it's a nice exercise. I don't doubt that, but it might actually be a little bit of a waste of time too. So that's another thing that I'll need to decide. Will I actually drive this through and write a whole markdown document on this change? There are arguments that speak for doing that. One argument being, I mean, think about it yourself. How many times did you pick up something you built, but months later, and you thought, what the heck was I thinking? And actually having a markdown document that gives you that answer, that tells you that's what I was thinking, is definitely an advantage. So we could do a poll if I'm able to spin one up. Question. Write the whole ADR, the whole architectural design record. Yes or no? So we'll give you 5 minutes And during that time, I'll take a short break. I'll be back soon. Alright, so I'm back, refreshed, and let's take a look at the results of the poll that I did on Twitch. If you're watching on YouTube or on my own cast live stream at live.monospacementor.com, simply post your answer to chat and we'll add it to the results. So let me see what people said. We got one yes. One yes on Twitch, and if you want. And we got one yes over on YouTube. So I guess that is a yes. And I think it might actually make sense to practice this a little bit. So, I guess an ADR should have an abstract. This ADR describes an extension of the data model to that will allow us and our customers to manage arbitrary services for clusters and websites. Background is at the moment we have our most basic and common services hard-coded. And that's databases, Redis servers. Even though Redis servers aren't even in the integrated into the UI yet, I think. Let's validate this. Do I have Redis? Yeah, we have a Redis service as a model here. Maybe it makes sense to actually take a look at our models to see which things are actually already represented. So we have domains, but they are not really services. They are more attributes of websites. We have databases, Redis. Yeah, that's basically it. So, okay. Oops. Even those are only services associated with websites. What we don't have is the actual plan configuration on the cluster level, i.e. the view allocation of a cluster, and adding more website specific services as dedicated models will make this let's rephrase that. And using dedicated models to add more website-specific services will make this task unnecessarily hard. What's wrong? Yeah, wait. Unnecessarily hard. This is why this ADR describes a generic way to implement cluster and website specific services as flexible as possible. This will allow us to finally track cluster configuration, track and visualize cluster configuration, as well as add more service options, such as let's say, what would we add? Elasticsearch.
It's a Unix system. I know this.
Gianni, thank you for the follow. Thanks for hopping over to Twitch and following me there. Feel free to subscribe on YouTube as well, if you haven't done so yet. Add more service options such as Elasticsearch or an observability package. What this extension will also, or based on this extension, will also be able to implement how do I call this? The fact that we can add pricing and allow people to interactively implement pricing information, which at the moment happens outside of the customer dashboard. Implement pricing information and processes for service orders and provisioning. Because once we have generic services implemented, we can also say, okay, a customer can add a service, book a service, and that service then goes into a pending state because it's not available yet. And either we then manually add the service to the hosting infrastructure and upgrade the plan status to available, or we could then even automate the service provisioning on the infrastructure level, and our infrastructure will provide that service automatically and then upgrade again the service to available, which of course would be the ideal state of things. But this all will be basically built upon this foundation of having services implemented in a generic way. We'll let me rephrase this here. So hard-coded. For example, databases and Redis servers. Okay. But even these view are only services associated with websites. I guess we could add that to this paragraph that you don't have at all. It's the actual plan configuration on the cluster level. Here, clicking on a cluster. And using dedicated monitor at more specific will make this task unnecessarily hard. This is why this ADR describes a generic way to implement cluster and website-specific services as flexible as possible. This will allow us to finally track and visualize cluster configuration, as well as add more service options such as Elasticsearch or an observability package. Based on this extension, we will also be able to implement pricing information and processes for service orders, for the ordering and provisioning of services by our customers. Okay, so this makes it pretty clear why I'm putting in this time. The data model, does this need to be... Yeah, it should be commented as well. But it's already past 5 o'clock, so what I'm going to do is I'll reformat this and turn this into single Ruby blocks. So I can comment them one by one. Oh wait, I need to do a little bit of register magic here to be able to paste this in. Oh, do I? Can I repeat this? Yes, I can. Oh, cool. I think I'm going to actually add another plugin to my NeoVim that shows keystrokes. Would you find this helpful to see the keystrokes that I'm making to do specific editing changes here? All right, so these are now separate code blocks, but I'll do the documenting of these code blocks another time. You can see joining us on Twitch. Hello. Welcome, even though I'm in the process of wrapping things up. And of course, every time we wrap things up, we commit. So I guess, let's call it background information to ADR. That's that. Push it. Bam. GN says, I usually forget the command, so I switch to lazy vim. Lazy vim or lazy git? Because that's what I'm using here as well. I did actually add a key bind to my tmux configuration, so I can always pull up a lazy git in a text window like this. Which is a lot of fun. All right, so that's that. I will continue with this on Thursday. Maybe tomorrow, not sure. It's planned. No, let's start again. Usually I code on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but I want to get this finished. So there might actually be a live stream tomorrow. If I... well, tomorrow morning maybe. I am going to meet a customer who's vacationing here in Ireland in the afternoon. And so there won't be a live stream tomorrow afternoon, but maybe one in the morning. And I just remember that there's an appointment in my calendar already. So yeah, forget everything I just said. There will be another live stream if all goes according to plan on Thursday afternoon at 2 o'clock Irish time. And we'll continue at this point then. So, yeah, that's it for today. I hope you had fun. And if you had, please don't forget to follow/subscribe to my channel, depending on where you are watching. You can also join my Discord if you have any questions that you'd like to ask outside of the stream. And I especially want to give a shout out to the server room, my DevOps community of practice. It's a membership community whose sole purpose is to help its members grow in the DevOps space, reach new levels of skills and knowledge, and maybe even new levels in people's careers, maybe get a new job in DevOps. And that's something that we specialize in. We have a great forum. We have events that we do with community members. We have courses that you'll have access to, hot seat sessions. We do a monthly community hangout where you simply go online and have a chat. Lots of stuff. So check out theserverroom.com to get all the details. And not only is the server room a great way to help yourself succeed better in the DevOps space. It's also a great way to support me and my work as a DevOps instructor. So please consider becoming a member of the server room. The more, the merrier. The bigger this community gets, the more helpful it will be, because it will get more diverse, and you'll have more people that can support you in your endeavors. So check out the serverroom.sh. And I hope to see you again on Thursday. Make sure to pop by and follow the stream so you get a notification when I go online. Until then, thanks for watching. Take care.